The predator had become prey. For nearly 3 years, the sleek gray shape of U-505 had stalked the Atlantic, a feared hunter in Adolf Hitler's deadly wolf pack. But on that fateful June day in 1944, just 2 days before the Allied invasion of Normandy, the roles dramatically reversed. As depth charges rained down from American ships, rupturing pipes and flooding compartments, what followed would become an unprecedented naval capture that shifted the course of the war, yet remained classified for years. The first enemy warship seized by the U.S. Navy since the War of 1812 was about to reveal its secrets. Before we dive into this extraordinary story, tell me in the comments, which city are you watching from? It's incredible to see our historical community spread across the world. And if you're new here, subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications. Each subscription helps us continue unearthing these fascinating stories that shaped our world. Now let's get to the story. The morning of June 4th, 1944, dawned with deceptive tranquility over the Atlantic, approximately 150 miles off the coast of Rio de Oro in French West Africa. Task Group 22.3, commanded by Captain Daniel 5. Gallery aboard the escort carrier USS Guadalcanal had been hunting German U-boats for months. This hunter-killer group comprised the carrier and 5 destroyer escorts, Pillsbury, Pope, Flaherty, Chatelain, and Jenks. They were no strangers to the deadly cat-and-mouse game played beneath the Atlantic waves. 3 weeks earlier, they had sunk U-515, and Gallery had been haunted by a thought ever since. What if they could capture a U-boat intact, with all its valuable intelligence? Captain Gallery had prepared meticulously for this possibility, training boarding parties and developing detailed procedures for securing an enemy submarine. He had disseminated his plans among the other ship captains, ensuring they all knew the goal wasn't merely to sink their enemy but to seize it. It was an audacious plan, unprecedented in modern naval warfare. But Gallery was convinced of its value and had convinced his men as well. While they hunted their prey in the warm Atlantic waters, none could have imagined how momentous this particular patrol would become. The Atlantic in 1944 was still a contested battlefield, though the tide had shifted from the desperate days of 1942 when U-boats sank Allied shipping with impunity. The introduction of long-range aircraft, improved radar and sonar, hunter-killer groups like Gallery's, and, crucially, the Allied breaking of German naval codes had gradually turned the tables. Yet German submarines remained a deadly threat, adapting their tactics and technology to the changing circumstances of war. For the sailors who manned ships in the Atlantic convoy routes, each crossing remained a perilous journey, fraught with the possibility that a silent predator lurked beneath the waves. Miles away, beneath the surface, Oberleutnant zur See Harold Lange commanded U-505, a Type 18C submarine. Commissioned in August 1941, the U-boat had seen better days. Once a proud predator that had sunk 8 Allied ships, U-505 had earned a reputation among the German fleet as an unlucky boat. Her career had been plagued by mechanical failures, sabotage from shipyard workers in occupied France, who drilled small holes in fuel tanks to leave telltale oil trails, and even the suicide of her second captain, Kapitänleutnant Peter Schech, who had shot himself in the head in the submarine's control room during a prolonged depth charge attack in October 1943. Lange, her third commander, was a 40-year-old reserve officer who had taken command in November 1943. This patrol had been particularly frustrating, with no Allied shipping found in nearly 2.5 months at sea. The crew of 59 German sailors was exhausted and demoralized as they made their way back to their base in Lorient, France. Unknown to them, Allied codebreakers had been tracking their movements through intercepted radio transmissions and had diverted all shipping away from their patrol area. Even more ominous for the German crew, intelligence had given Gallery's task group their approximate location. The Type 18C submarine that Lange commanded was a formidable vessel, designed for extended operations in distant waters. At 252 feet long and displacing 120 tons surfaced, U-505 was significantly larger than the more numerous Type 7 submarines that formed the backbone of the German U-boat fleet. Powered by two MAN 9-cylinder diesel engines generating 4,400 horsepower for surface running, she could reach speeds of 18.3 knots above water and 7.3 knots when submerged using electric motors. Her range was impressive, 11,000 nautical miles when cruising at 12 knots on the surface. Armed with 6 torpedo tubes, 4 forward, 2 aft, and carrying 22 torpedoes plus deck guns for surface attacks, U-505 was designed to be a deadly hunter on the high seas. Life aboard the submarine was cramped and uncomfortable. With a complement of 48 sailors, space was at a premium. Most of the crew had to hot bunk, sharing sleeping berths in shifts as others performed their duties. The boat lacked air conditioning, so temperatures in tropical waters could become unbearable. Sanitation was minimal, and after weeks at sea, the stench of unwashed bodies, diesel fumes, cooking odors, and human waste created an atmosphere that veterans described as indescribable. Fresh water was strictly rationed, limited to drinking, and minimal cooking needs. Despite these hardships, U-boat crews were considered elite units within the German Navy, receiving better rations than other branches of service and enjoying special status. For Lang and his men, this patrol had tested their endurance to the limit. Setting out on March 16, 1944, they had patrolled the west coast of Africa for more than 2 months without encountering a single Allied vessel. Mechanical problems had plagued them throughout, and the submarine's faulty hydrophones made detecting enemy ships difficult and dangerous. Morale had deteriorated as the fruitless patrol continued, with many of the crew convinced that the boat's reputation for bad luck was justified. As they began their return journey to Lorient in late May, all aboard looked forward to reaching port, unaware that Allied intelligence was tracking their movements and that a hunter-killer group was preparing to intercept them. At 11:09 on that June morning, the sonar operator aboard the USS Chatelain made contact with an underwater target. Captain Gallery immediately ordered the task group into attack formation. The hunter-killer group had found its prey. 2 FM-2 Wildcat fighter planes from the Guadalcanal were dispatched to the scene to assist in the attack. U-505's hydrophone operators detected the American ship's propellers, but the submarine's faulty sound detection equipment gave only faint readings. When Lang raised the periscope to investigate, he was horrified to find his boat in the midst of an American carrier task group with destroyers closing in. Lang ordered an emergency dive, but it was too late. The American aircraft had spotted the U-boat's periscope wake and marked the location with machine gun fire, creating telltale splashes on the ocean surface. The USS Chatelain immediately moved into position and launched a pattern of 13 hedgehogs, specialized anti-submarine projectiles that explode only upon contact with a solid object. Moments later, the Chatelain followed with a barrage of conventional depth charges set for shallow detonation. Inside U-505, chaos erupted. The depth charges exploded with devastating force, cracking the pressure hull, jamming the rudder, disabling the electrical systems, and flooding the aft compartments. "They really gave it to us," U-505 crewman Hans Gerbler would later recall. "The explosions were the biggest I ever heard." With water pouring in, instruments failing, and the submarine's stern sinking, Oberleutnant Lang made a fateful decision. Believing his vessel fatally damaged, he ordered the crew to abandon ship and implement standard scuttling procedures to ensure the submarine and its secrets would sink to the ocean floor. The German Navy had drilled its submariners extensively on scuttling procedures. Standard protocol called for opening sea valves to flood the boat, setting scuttling charges to destroy sensitive equipment, and above all, ensuring the destruction of the Enigma encryption machine and codebooks that were the most valuable intelligence assets aboard. The loss of a submarine was acceptable. The compromise of the codes that secured all German naval communications was not. Every U-boat commander understood that allowing these materials to fall into enemy hands could have catastrophic consequences for the entire German naval effort. In the pandemonium that followed, the German sailors raced to open the sea valves that would flood the boat and set explosive charges. But in their haste to escape the seemingly doomed vessel, these procedures were only partially completed. The submarine surfaced just 6.5 minutes after the initial sonar contact, taking the Americans by surprise with the speed of the German response. As U-505 broke the surface, the American ships immediately opened fire with their deck guns. Bullets raked the conning tower, wounding Lange and killing one German sailor, Signalman First Class Gottfried Fischer, the only fatality in the capture operation. The remaining crew, following Lange's orders, abandoned ship by leaping into the Atlantic. As they swam away from their vessel, they watched with grim certainty as their boat began taking on water. But something unexpected happened. With its rudder jammed, U-505 began moving in a slow circle at approximately 7 knots, its diesel engines still running. The submarine was not sinking as quickly as the Germans had anticipated. Captain Gallery, seeing his opportunity, made a momentous decision. He ordered his ships to cease fire to avoid damaging the precious prize and broadcast over the radio, "I want to capture that bastard if possible." This was the moment Gallery had prepared for. In the weeks following the sinking of U-515, he had developed a detailed plan for capturing an enemy submarine, briefing his officers, and training boarding parties. He had even prepared special equipment, including submersible pumps for dewatering a flooding vessel and tools for disarming scuttling charges. His superiors had indulged what seemed like an improbable fantasy, but Gallery remained convinced that capturing a U-boat intact would yield invaluable intelligence. Now, as he watched U-505 circling with its engines still running, he knew his moment had come. The USS Shetland and USS Jenks began rescuing the German survivors from the water, while Gallery ordered the USS Pillsbury to send over its boarding party. Leading the boarding party was Lieutenant Junior Grade Albert L. David, accompanied by 2 sailors, Torpedo Man's Mate 3rd Class Arthur W. Knispel and Radio Man 2nd Class Stanley E. Bedoyak. With extraordinary courage, they leapt from their whaleboat onto the pitching deck of the circling submarine, fully aware it might be rigged with explosive charges or sink beneath their feet at any moment. David led his men down the conning tower hatch into the unknown darkness below. The scene that greeted them was eerie. An abandoned submarine with equipment still running, water sloshing across the deck plates, and the ever-present danger of scuttling charges. Moving swiftly through the boat, they found the body of Signalman Fischer on the deck, but encountered no resistance. Their primary mission was to prevent the submarine from sinking and secure any intelligence materials before they could be destroyed. What followed was a race against time and water. The boarding party focused on closing the open sea valves and disarming the scuttling charges they found. Knispel discovered the submarine's main vents were open and quickly closed them. Meanwhile, other team members located and disarmed demolition charges throughout the boat. In the radio room, they found the ultimate prize, 2 German Enigma encryption machines, complete with current settings and code books. These were immediately secured for transport back to the American ships. The Enigma machines were sophisticated encryption devices that used rotating wheels or rotors to scramble messages, making them virtually impossible to decode without knowing the exact settings. The version found on U-505 was an M4 Naval Enigma with 4 rotors, including one that was an advanced model with a printing attachment. Along with the machines, the boarding party discovered code books, daily settings sheets, and approximately 900 pounds of other classified documents. This intelligence treasure trove would prove invaluable to Allied code-breaking efforts at Bletchley Park in England, where mathematicians and cryptanalysts worked tirelessly to break German codes. As more sailors from the task group joined the initial boarding party, they brought portable pumps to combat the flooding. The technical challenges were enormous. The submarine had no functioning lights. Its electrical systems were disabled, and it was taking on water in multiple compartments. The Americans worked feverishly in the cramped, dark confines of the submarine, often standing in cold seawater up to their waists. By an extraordinary stroke of fortune, a Polish-speaking American sailor was able to communicate with a Polish member of U-505's crew, who provided crucial information about the boat's engines and bilge pump systems in exchange for promises of better treatment. The submarine's diesel engines were still running when the boarding party arrived, powering the vessel in its circular path at about 7 knots. This presented both danger and opportunity. The running engines meant the electrical systems could potentially be restored, allowing the submarine's own pumps to be used in dewatering operations. But controlling a vessel with a jammed rudder, no navigation lights, and malfunctioning controls posed significant challenges. The boarding team had to improvise solutions to problems no American sailor had ever trained for, drawing on their technical knowledge and ingenuity to address each crisis as it arose. With the immediate danger of sinking addressed, Captain Gallery made another bold decision. Rather than simply stripping the submarine of intelligence material, he would attempt to salvage the entire vessel and bring it back to American territory. This was an unprecedented challenge. No one had ever attempted to tow a captured enemy submarine across thousands of miles of ocean, especially while maintaining absolute secrecy about the operation. The first step was establishing a tow line from the USS Guadalcanal to the U-505, a difficult procedure given the submarine's circular movement and damaged condition. After several failed attempts, a tow line was secured, and the long journey began. For 3 days, the Guadalcanal towed the submarine before transferring it to the fleet tug USS Abnaki for the remainder of the 1,500 nautical mile journey to Bermuda. During this time, the 58 surviving German prisoners, 3 of them wounded, including Lange, were distributed among the American ships. These men represented another security challenge. If word reached German High Command that U-505 had been captured rather than sunk, the Germans would immediately change all their codes and encryption settings, negating the intelligence value of the capture. The Allied D-Day invasion of Normandy was just days away, scheduled for June 6th, and maintaining the secrecy of the operation was paramount. The timing of U-505's capture could not have been more significant. Just 2 days later, on June 6, 1944, Allied forces would launch the largest amphibious invasion in history on the beaches of Normandy. Operation Overlord depended on misleading German High Command about the location and timing of the invasion, a deception that relied heavily on the Allies' ability to read German military communications. If the Germans discovered that a submarine with current code books had fallen into Allied hands, they would change their codes immediately, potentially jeopardizing the success of the D-Day landings and costing thousands of Allied lives. The American sailors understood the historic significance of what they had accomplished. Lieutenant Junior Grade David and his boarding party had demonstrated extraordinary courage by entering the potentially booby-trapped submarine. For their actions, David would later be awarded the Medal of Honor, the only one awarded to an Atlantic Fleet sailor in World War II. Tragically, he would not live to receive it, dying of a heart attack in September 1945, shortly after the war's end. Knispel and Wadowiak received Navy crosses for being the first to follow David into the submarine, and the entire task group was awarded the Presidential Unit Citation for their unprecedented achievement. As U-505 was towed toward Bermuda, a storm of controversy erupted at the highest levels of Naval Command. When Admiral Ernest King, Chief of Naval Operations, learned of the capture, he was furious. He believed Gallery had risked compromising the Allied code-breaking operation, known as Ultra, which had been providing crucial intelligence throughout the war. King initially considered court-martialing Gallery for his actions, but eventually cooled down as the intelligence benefits of the capture became apparent. The controversy reflected the high stakes of wartime intelligence and the delicate balance between tactical opportunity and strategic security. The journey to Bermuda was arduous. Towing a partially damaged submarine across the open Atlantic presented numerous engineering challenges. The tow cables frequently broke under the strain and had to be reattached, a dangerous operation in the rolling seas. Weather conditions were often adverse, and the ever-present threat of German air or submarine attack added to the tension. The task group maintained radio silence to avoid detection, and the submarine was disguised as much as possible to prevent recognition from a distance. After more than 2 weeks at sea, U-505 finally arrived at the U.S. Naval Operating Base in Bermuda's Great Sound on June 19, 1944. The security measures surrounding U-505's capture were extraordinary. The submarine was disguised with American markings and given the code name USS Nemo. Its German crew was held in complete isolation at Camp Ruston, Louisiana, denied Red Cross visits, and prohibited from communicating with their families, a technical violation of the Geneva Convention, but deemed necessary for wartime security. In Germany, the men were officially declared missing and presumed dead. Their families would not learn the truth until 1947, long after the war had ended. Camp Ruston, located in northern Louisiana, was one of the largest prisoner of war camps in the United States during World War II. At its peak, it housed over 400 prisoners, primarily from Germany's Afrika Korps. The camp was generally well run, following Geneva Convention requirements for treatment of POWs. But for the 58 survivors of U-505, conditions were different. They were kept in an isolated section, separated from other German prisoners, and subjected to special security measures. Though they received adequate food and medical care, their isolation and inability to communicate with families caused significant psychological stress. This special treatment reflected the extreme importance American authorities placed on keeping the capture secret. On June 19, 1944, U-505 arrived in Bermuda, where Navy intelligence officers and technicians descended on the prize to extract every possible piece of valuable information. The 2 Enigma machines, including a rare 4-rotor model with an experimental printing attachment, were immediately flown to Washington, D.C. The code books, settings sheets, and approximately 900 pounds of other documents were sent to the code-breaking facility at Bletchley Park in England. Bletchley Park, a Victorian mansion and estate about 50 miles northwest of London, housed the government code and cipher school, where thousands of codebreakers, mathematicians, and linguists worked in total secrecy to decipher enemy communications. Under the leadership of brilliant minds like Alan Turing, the Bletchley team had achieved remarkable success in breaking German Enigma codes, an effort codenamed Ultra. But the German Navy's 4-rotor Enigma, used for submarine communications and called Shark by the Allies, presented particularly difficult challenges. The materials from U-505 provided immediate intelligence value and streamlined the ongoing code-breaking efforts. The intelligence coup was significant. While the Allies had already broken many of Germany's Enigma codes through mathematical analysis and the use of early computers called bombs, the materials from U-505 provided immediate access to current settings and, more importantly, code books that would otherwise have taken weeks or months to break. The submarine yielded the special coordinate code used to encrypt locations, the regular and officer Enigma settings for June 1944, the current short weather codebook, and the short signal codebook and Bigram tables due to come into effect in July and August. This intelligence allowed Allied convoys to avoid heavily patrolled areas and directed hunter-killer groups to known U-boat concentrations. The materials arrived at Bletchley Park on June 20, 1944, just as the Normandy invasion was gaining momentum. While the specific Enigma settings would remain valid only until the end of June, the codebooks and other materials provided lasting value for Allied codebreakers throughout the remainder of the war. The Enigma encryption system represented one of the most sophisticated cryptographic technologies of the era. It used a series of rotating wheels, or rotors, with electrical contacts that scrambled plain text into seemingly random ciphertext. Each day, German operators would configure their machines according to settings distributed in codebooks, changing rotor orders, ring settings, and plugboard connections. The system was so complex that German high command believed it to be unbreakable, with possible combinations numbering in the millions. The naval enigma found on U-505 with its 4 rotors was even more secure than standard models. The capture of not just the machines but also the current settings and code books was an intelligence windfall of incalculable value. Beyond the cryptographic treasures, U-505 provided a wealth of technical intelligence about German submarine design and equipment. Naval engineers studied its diesel engines, hydraulic systems, and weaponry, including 2 of the new acoustic homing torpedoes for which the Allies had no effective countermeasures. These T-5 Zaunkönig Wren torpedoes were designed to home in on the noise of a ship's propellers, making them particularly deadly against escort vessels. The opportunity to examine these weapons intact allowed American engineers to develop countermeasures more quickly than would otherwise have been possible. Every inch of the submarine was photographed, measured, and analyzed, providing invaluable insights that would inform anti-submarine warfare tactics for the remainder of the conflict. The air purification system, the snorkel device that allowed the submarine to run its diesel engines while submerged, the advanced sonar equipment, all were examined in detail. Some of the technology was found to be superior to American equivalents, while other systems proved disappointing. This comprehensive technical evaluation provided American naval architects and engineers with a complete picture of German submarine capabilities and limitations, information that would prove valuable not just for the remainder of the war, but for post-war submarine development as well. For the duration of the war, the capture of U-505 remained one of the most closely guarded secrets of the Allied effort. It was not until Germany's surrender on May 7, 1945, that the U.S. Navy finally revealed the extraordinary story to the public. The submarine was sent on tour as part of the 7th War Loan Drive, visiting East Coast cities where spectators could board in exchange for purchasing war bonds. This tour raised millions of dollars for the continuing war effort against Japan. The public response to U-505 was overwhelming. In port after port, thousands lined up to purchase war bonds that would grant them access to the captured submarine. For many Americans, it provided their first opportunity to see the type of vessel that had threatened Allied shipping throughout the war. The submarine became a symbol of Allied naval success and technological superiority. The Navy's careful presentation emphasized both the deadly nature of the German submarine fleet and the courage and ingenuity of American sailors who had captured this example intact. Though much of the intelligence value of the capture remained classified, the public narrative celebrated the achievement as a significant milestone in the Atlantic campaign. After the war, the Navy had no further operational use for U-505 and planned to use it as a target for gunnery and torpedo practice until it sank. When Rear Admiral Gallery learned of this plan, he was determined to save the submarine he and his men had risked so much to capture. Through his brother, Father John Gallery, he contacted Lennox Lohr, president of Chicago's Museum of Science and Industry, who immediately recognized the historical value of the vessel. The museum launched a campaign to raise funds to bring U-505 to Chicago, and in 1954, the submarine was donated to the institution. The fundraising effort rallied the people of Chicago, particularly the city's large Polish-American community, who viewed the submarine as a trophy captured from Nazi Germany. Various civic organizations, businesses, and individuals contributed to the campaign, raising over $250,000, a substantial sum for the time. The effort reflected the growing awareness of World War II's historical significance and the desire to preserve tangible connections to that conflict for future generations. The final journey of U-505 proved almost as challenging as its capture. The submarine was towed through the Great Lakes to Chicago, then moved overland to the museum in an extraordinary engineering operation. Moving a 700-ton submarine across city streets required specialized equipment and careful planning. The vessel had to be partially disassembled for the journey, with certain components removed to reduce weight and facilitate transport. Streets were closed, utility lines temporarily moved, and special reinforced trailers constructed to bear the immense weight. When the submarine finally arrived at its destination on the grounds of the Museum of Science and Industry, it represented the culmination of a remarkable logistical achievement. On September 25, 1954, U-505 was dedicated as a permanent exhibit and war memorial, the first German submarine exhibited in the Western Hemisphere. For decades it remained an outdoor exhibit, exposed to Chicago's harsh weather conditions. This exposure caused significant deterioration, prompting concerns about the long-term preservation of this unique artifact. In 2004, the museum undertook a $35 million project to move the submarine to a purpose-built, climate-controlled underground exhibit hall, protecting it from further environmental damage and creating a more immersive visitor experience. The renovation involved another complex engineering feat, moving the massive submarine approximately 1,000 feet to its new home. The boat was jacked up and placed on Teflon pads to minimize friction, then pushed across specially constructed bridge beams spanning its new exhibit space. Once positioned correctly, it was lowered 42 feet into the underground hall. The renovated exhibit opened to the public in 2005, featuring not just the submarine itself, but an extensive collection of artifacts, interactive displays, and educational materials that contextualize the vessel within the larger story of World War II's Battle of the Atlantic. For Oberleutnant Harold Lang and his crew, the aftermath of their capture brought mixed fortunes. Held in secret confinement until 1947, they were finally repatriated to Germany, where many were shocked to find them alive. Lange, who had lost a leg due to injuries sustained during the capture, eventually found work on the Hamburg docks. In a remarkable postscript to the story, he later corresponded with Captain Gallery and even visited the United States in 1964, where the two former enemies met in a spirit of reconciliation. Lang expressed no resentment over his treatment, recognizing the necessities of wartime secrecy. When Lang and his crew were finally released from captivity, they returned to a Germany vastly different from the one they had left. Their homeland lay in ruins, divided between Western and Soviet occupation zones that would soon become separate nations. Many found their homes destroyed, their families displaced, and economic conditions desperate. They had to rebuild their lives in a society undergoing profound political and social transformation. The experience of U-505's crew reflected the broader challenges faced by returning German POWs, who often encountered a complex mixture of welcome, suspicion, and indifference from their countrymen. The post-war reconciliation between Gallery and Lange symbolized the changing relationship between former enemies. As Cold War tensions mounted, West Germany became an ally of the United States, and the shared experience of opposing Soviet expansion created new bonds between nations that had so recently been at war. Gallery's book about the capture, Clear the Decks, published in 1951, became a bestseller, bringing the story of U-505 to a wide audience. Lange, for his part, maintained that he had done his duty as a naval officer and harbored no ill will toward the Americans who had captured his vessel and saved the lives of his crew. Hans Goebeler, a crewman on U-505, settled in the United States after the war and became an American citizen. In later years, he visited the submarine in Chicago multiple times and shared his experiences with museum visitors, providing first-hand accounts of life aboard the U-boat and the dramatic circumstances of its capture. In 1997, at age 74, he told an interviewer, "No matter what happened to her, she always brought us back. She wouldn't even let anything happen to the Americans who boarded her. I think our boat was the luckiest ship in World War II." His perspective offered a poignant counterpoint to U-505's reputation as an unlucky boat within the German Navy. The capture of U-505 stands as one of the most audacious naval operations of World War II. The courage of Lieutenant David and the boarding party, the visionary leadership of Captain Gallery, and the technical skills of the sailors who saved the submarine from sinking all contributed to an achievement that had tangible effects on the outcome of the war. The intelligence gleaned from the captured Enigma machines and codebooks saved countless Allied lives by helping to defeat the U-boat threat more quickly. Gallery's decision to capture rather than sink the submarine represented a form of strategic thinking that looked beyond immediate tactical objectives. He recognized that intelligence could be as valuable as destruction in the broader conduct of war. His preparation and training of boarding parties demonstrated foresight and imagination, qualities that distinguish the most effective military leaders. Though he initially faced criticism from his superiors, history has vindicated his judgment, and the capture of U-505 is now recognized as one of the most significant naval intelligence coups of the war. The story also highlights the importance of technical expertise in modern warfare. The American sailors who boarded U-505 confronted complex engineering challenges that required immediate improvised solutions. Their ability to understand the submarine's systems, close valves, disarm charges, restore electrical power, and address flooding represented a high level of technical proficiency. Similarly, the codebreakers who exploited the captured materials combined mathematical genius with linguistic skills and technological innovation to extract maximum intelligence value from the prize. The episode underscores how modern warfare increasingly demands not just courage, but also specialized technical knowledge. Today, U-505 continues its silent service as a museum ship in Chicago, where it underwent a $35 million conservation and renovation project completed in 2005. Moved to a climate-controlled underground exhibit, the submarine has been meticulously restored to its wartime condition, allowing visitors to experience the cramped conditions in which submarine crews operated. More than 24 million people have toured the submarine since it became a museum exhibit, making it one of the most visited warships in the world. The museum has created an immersive educational experience around the submarine, incorporating interactive exhibits, historical artifacts, and multimedia presentations that place U-505 within the broader context of World War II. Visitors can explore the technology of submarine warfare, learn about the Battle of the Atlantic, and understand the significance of the vessel's capture. Special tours allow access to the submarine's interior, where guides explain the functions of various compartments and equipment. This educational approach ensures that U-505 serves not just as a curiosity, but as a portal to understanding a crucial chapter in world history. In 1989, U-505 was designated a National Historic Landmark, recognizing its unique place in naval history. It remains one of only 5 German U-boats preserved as museum ships worldwide, and is the only Type Yangtze submarine on display in the Western Hemisphere. Each year, hundreds of thousands of visitors walk through its narrow passageways, confronting the technological and human dimensions of submarine warfare. The submarine's capture was emblematic of a turning point in the Battle of the Atlantic. By June 1944, the tide had decisively shifted against the German U-boat fleet. Improved Allied anti-submarine tactics, better radar and sonar technology, and the crucial advantage provided by ultra-intelligence had combined to neutralize what had once been Germany's most effective weapon. The wolf packs that had threatened to strangle Britain's supply lines early in the war were now themselves being hunted to extinction. The Battle of the Atlantic represented the longest continuous military campaign of World War II, lasting from September 1939 until Germany's surrender in May 1945. At stake was nothing less than Britain's survival as a combatant nation. Without secure sea lanes to bring food, fuel, weapons, and other supplies from North America, Britain could not have sustained its war effort or served as the staging ground for the liberation of Western Europe. At the height of the battle in 1942-43, German U-boats threatened to sever this vital maritime lifeline, sinking ships faster than they could be replaced and inflicting casualties that would ultimately total over 72,000 Allied naval and merchant sailors. The gradual Allied victory in this crucial campaign resulted from a combination of factors: technological innovations like improved radar and sonar, tactical developments such as the convoy system and hunter-killer groups, the massive industrial output of American shipyards producing both merchant ships and escort vessels, the extension of air cover across the entire Atlantic, and crucially, the intelligence advantage provided by breaking German naval codes. The capture of U-505 contributed to this last factor, providing immediate intelligence benefits and symbolic confirmation that the tide had turned against the once feared U-boat fleet. For the men who participated in the capture, the experience remained the defining moment of their naval careers. In interviews decades later, they recalled the mixture of fear and determination they felt when boarding the enemy submarine, uncertain whether it would sink beneath them or explode from hidden charges. Their actions represented the best traditions of courage and initiative in the U.S. Navy, improvising solutions to unprecedented challenges in the heat of combat. The legacy of Task Group 22.3 extended far beyond the capture itself. Many of its members went on to distinguished careers in the post-war Navy, carrying forward the lessons learned during their Atlantic service. The unprecedented Presidential Unit Citation, awarded to the entire task group, recognized not just the capture of U-505, but the cumulative achievement of their anti-submarine operations throughout 1944. Their experience informed naval doctrine, training, and equipment development in the decades that followed, helping to shape the modern U.S. Navy's approach to maritime warfare. The story of U-505 is not merely one of technical achievement or military valor, though it certainly encompasses both. It is also a human story of Captain Gallery's inspired leadership, of Lieutenant David's selfless courage, of the German crew's shock and despair as their submarine was taken, and of Oberleutnant Lang's dignified acceptance of his fate. It speaks to the strange ironies of war that a vessel designed for stealth and destruction would find immortality as an educational exhibit, teaching generations about a conflict that shaped the modern world. The human dimension of the story reminds us that beyond the strategic calculations, technological innovations, and battlefield tactics, warfare ultimately involves individuals making decisions under extreme pressure, confronting fear, demonstrating courage, experiencing loss, and sometimes finding unexpected moments of compassion even in the midst of conflict. The mutual respect that developed between Gallery and Lange in the years following the war exemplifies how former adversaries can recognize each other's humanity once the immediate imperatives of combat have passed. As the decades pass and the events of World War II recede further into history, the preserved U-505 serves as a tangible connection to that momentous struggle. Visitors who descend into its hull today can touch the actual Enigma machine mounting brackets, see the cramped bunks where exhausted sailors slept in shifts, and stand in the control room where life and death decisions were made. They confront the technological sophistication that made submarine warfare so lethal, but also the human vulnerability of sailors operating in such unforgiving environments. The experience of touring U-505 challenges visitors to imagine the psychological reality of submarine service, the claustrophobia of confinement in a steel tube beneath hundreds of feet of ocean, the tension of hunting enemy vessels while simultaneously being hunted, the physical discomfort of crowded conditions and limited sanitation, and the camaraderie that developed among men sharing these extreme circumstances. It provides insight into a form of warfare that combined cutting-edge technology with profound isolation, where crews might go weeks without seeing the sun or breathing fresh air. The capture of U-505 reminds us that history often turns on singular moments of decision, Gallery's determination to capture rather than sink the submarine, David's courage in leading the boarding party, the quick thinking of sailors who closed valves and disarmed charges. It stands as testimony to how individual actions, undertaken with skill and daring, can influence events far beyond their immediate scope. Such moments of decision occur throughout history, but rarely with such clearly traceable consequences as in the case of U-505. The intelligence materials captured aboard the submarine contributed directly to Allied victory in the Battle of the Atlantic, which in turn enabled the buildup of forces in Britain that made the Normandy invasion possible. That invasion established the Western Front that, combined with Soviet pressure from the east, led to Germany's defeat. The capture thus represents a small but significant link in the chain of causation leading to Allied victory in Europe. In the final analysis, U-505's greatest legacy may lie in how it connects us to the larger narrative of World War II, the global struggle that defined the 20th century and continues to shape our world today. Its presence in Chicago, thousands of miles from the waters where it once hunted Allied shipping, offers silent witness to both the destructive power of modern warfare and humanity's capacity to preserve and learn from even the darkest chapters of our shared history. As new generations of visitors encounter U-505, they engage with history not as an abstraction, but as a physical reality they can see, touch, and experience. The submarine serves as what historians call a lieu de mémoire, a site of memory where the past remains accessible to the present. In an age of digital simulation and virtual experience, such authentic artifacts provide an irreplaceable connection to historical reality. They remind us that history is not merely a subject to be studied, but a legacy we inherit, preserve, and transmit to those who follow.